Ladies and gentlemen, good morning from Geneva. I would like to thank you for inviting me to address you today. Due to conflicting engagements as we prepare for our ministerial conference in just over 2 weeks, I could not join the discussion in person. But I'm happy to speak to you about how Africa's integration in the AFCFTA is a positive development within Africa, as well as the WTO. I'll focus on 3 issues. First, what are the expected benefits of the AFCFTA? 2, how to reap those benefits. And 3, how the WTO can help. We see the AFCFTA as a key milestone to promote the African economic community and to realize the Agenda 2063 vision of a prosperous and united Africa that's an influential global player. There's an immense value in the economic integration of the African continent. As we know, African trade in goods and services amounts to only 3% of global exports and imports on average. And primary commodities are Africa's main export to the rest of the world, accounting for 82% of total exports. Intra-African trade amounts to just 16% of Africa's total trade, which is significantly less than in some other regions of the world. The AFCFTA has the potential to change those low numbers, boosting intra-African trade by removing trade barriers, lowering trade costs, and advancing industrialization across the continent. So, how do the African countries make sure they reap these prospective benefits? Tariff reduction would be the first and relatively easy step. While some countries are concerned about potential loss of tariff revenue, reducing the costs of imports helps Africa integrate and establish economies of scale. The more difficult part would be to address non-tariff barriers and to cut costs to trade. Non-tariff barriers are hard to tackle because often it's difficult to detect them. I'm impressed by the AFCFTA online tool launched with the help of UNCTAD to track and address non-tariff barriers by allowing users to submit complaints. As to reducing trade costs, trade facilitation is the best tool, particularly for the many landlocked developing countries in sub-Saharan Africa. Implementing the WTO Trade Facilitation Agreement will help African countries harmonize customs and transit procedures, cut red tape, and reduce logistics and other trade costs. Our data suggests that full implementation of the Trade Facilitation Agreement in Africa will cut trade costs by 16.5% on average. The success of AFCFTA will also depend on whether African countries focus on increasing their manufacturing capabilities in a highly competitive global landscape. A big test for the agreement will be the extent to which it's inclusive. And there are 2 dimensions of this inclusiveness. First, the benefits of the agreement should extend to all parties, and not only to the biggest and most economically developed ones. Second, the agreement must create opportunities for women and young people. Some 80% of businesses in Africa are MSMEs. The informal sector accounts for about 85% of economic activity in Africa, and women account for almost 90% of the labor force in the informal sector. These businesses and entrepreneurs must have access to finance, a production network, and markets, and they must be able to access digital markets and participate in e-commerce. This brings me to my last point. How can the WTO help? The WTO has undertaken various efforts to support trade development in Africa over the years. For example, we have supported trade development in Africa through our Aid for Trade initiative, which focuses on economic diversification as a key to development. Since its launch in 2006, donors have disbursed $451 billion in official development assistance to help developing countries build trade capacity and infrastructure. Of this amount, $163 billion has gone to African countries. Moreover, the WTO has supported different aspects of the AFCFTA negotiations and participated in capacity-building meetings with different subregions, something I'm very proud of. Let me note that all 9 African countries seeking to accede to the WTO are signatories of the AFCFTA. Coherence and synergies between the WTO accession process and AFCFTA implementation are very important and have been the main focus of the WTO's technical assistance and capacity building activities. Here at the WTO, we're committed to continuing to support the successful implementation of the AFCFTA through our Aid for Trade initiative, training, experience sharing, research, and other available means. At the same time, I would like to underline the importance of transparency in AFCFTA implementation. Transparency is an important pillar of the multilateral trading system. As a rule, WTO members notify a regional trade agreement once they've ratified it, and it's reviewed by the membership. However, the AFCFTA has not yet been notified to the WTO. It's important that such notification takes place in line with standard transparency obligations. Among other things, this would help the WTO Secretariat to provide more targeted assistance and technical advice. And it would also give other trading partners an opportunity to study it and incentivize those partners to notify their agreements that may be of interest to Africa. To conclude, I would like to once again stress that if properly implemented, the AFCFTA will be enormously beneficial for the African continent. Given the ambition of the enterprise, that is, integrating an entire continent, this has certainly not been an easy feat. Much progress has been made, and despite some delays in negotiations and other challenges, the benefits appear within reach. But to reap them fully, there's still much work to be done, and the WTO looks forward to continuing our partnership. Thank you very much.